They said it was just a harmless moment, just a glance, just a passing interaction at a royal event that should have meant nothing. But what if that moment was the spark that exposed everything Harry had been hiding for years? What if the cameras caught more than expressions? What if a single exchange revealed jealousy, rivalry, resentment, and a shocking statement from Prince Harry that no one was ever supposed to hear? And what if that statement was the one line that could unravel the entire image of the Sussex marriage? Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Because according to whispers, lip readers, and palace staff who swear they were close enough to hear it, Prince Harry reacted to Meghan Markle's latest jealous move toward Kate Middleton with a phrase no husband should ever say. The phrase that echoed through the internet like a slap. The phrase that made people gasp, screenshot, zoom in, slow down footage, and argue for days. The phrase that has now become impossible to ignore. She is not my wife. But did he actually say it? Did he mean Meghan? Did he mean Kate? Was it a deflection? A correction? A joke? A slip? Or was it something deeper, darker, and far more revealing about the state of his marriage, his loyalties, and the woman he once called the love of his life? This story doesn't begin with the alleged words. It begins with the look. The moment Meghan Markle's expression shifted the second Kate Middleton entered the room. A tightening of the jaw, a half-smile that didn't reach the eyes, a subtle step forward as though she needed to reclaim space that wasn't being taken from her in the first place. It was small, but it was sharp, and millions felt it. You felt it. The world felt it. But why? Why would Meghan, who insists she has moved beyond the royal world, still react like that? Why would Kate, ever composed, ever gracious, become the silent trigger? Why would Harry suddenly stiffen, adjust his stance, and lean away instead of toward his wife? The public saw it. The commentators replayed it. The analysts dissected it. And the audience at home felt something far more powerful than body language. They felt tension, and tension always has a story behind it. Think about it. When have we ever seen Meghan and Kate together without the air changing? When has Meghan ever appeared relaxed in Kate's presence? When has Harry ever looked like he knew how to bridge the divide? And more importantly, why is the divide still there if Meghan and Harry supposedly left to escape it? Unless the divide wasn't about the palace. Unless it never was. Unless the divide was between the two women all along. So ask yourself this. What would make Meghan attempt a gesture that appeared friendly on the surface but carried the unmistakable undertone of competition? What would make Kate respond with a calm that only made things worse for Meghan? What would make Harry react in a way that caught the attention of people who never cared about royal gossip before? Because this wasn't just another royal stare down. This was different. This time, people sensed a fracture. Not between Meghan and Kate. Not between Meghan and the monarchy, but between Meghan and Harry. A fracture that showed itself through one simple moment. A moment that is now being called the turning point. But here's the twist. No one agrees on what triggered it. Some say Meghan was upset because Kate received louder applause. Some claim Meghan tried to overshadow Kate with her outfit. Others swear Meghan stepped into Kate's conversation uninvited. Another version suggests Kate ignored Meghan completely. And the most explosive theory? Someone whispered something to Harry right before it happened. Something that made him react. Something that made him distance himself. Something that made Meghan flare with jealousy in an instant. So what was said? Who said it? And why did it matter? This is where the story deepens. Because reportedly, Harry was already tense before Kate arrived. Already distracted. Already unsettled. Meghan, meanwhile, was unusually alert, scanning the room, watching reactions, tracking where eyes landed. As if waiting. As if anticipating. As if preparing. Does that sound like confidence? Or fear? Was Meghan trying to reinforce her place? Or protect it? And here's the real question. Protect it from whom? Kate didn't say a word. She didn't need to. Sometimes silence is the most powerful language. Sometimes composure is louder than confrontation. Sometimes grace is its own weapon. And Meghan felt it. Harry felt it. We felt it. Because Meghan didn't step closer to Kate out of warmth. No one believes that. Not even the people who defend her online with essays, hashtags, and threads. No, the move was territorial. The kind of move someone makes when they feel something slipping. But slipping from where? From Harry? From the public? From relevance? From identity? Ask yourself this. Why would Meghan, who has spent the last few years branding herself as independent, empowered, evolved, and detached from the monarchy, react like someone still fighting for dominance inside it? Unless she is still competing. Unless she is still comparing. Unless she is still losing. And then comes the part that electrified the internet. Harry's face. The moment Meghan made her move toward Kate, Harry didn't look proud. He didn't look amused. He didn't look supportive. He looked tired. A flash of exhaustion. A flicker of regret. A moment of realization. You saw it. Everyone saw it. Even those who pretended they didn't saw it. And then he said something under his breath. Something sharp. Something short. Something that made Meghan freeze for half a second. Something that made Kate glance, but not react. Something that made a nearby aide look down and swallow. Was it really the line? Was it really the phrase that shook the narrative? She is not my wife. Or was it only part of it? Some claim he said, she is not my wife in the way she thinks she is. Others insist it was, she is not my wife to compare with Kate. And a more dramatic interpretation claims, she is not my wife, not really. But the most chilling theory? The one no one wants to repeat, but everyone is thinking? She is not my wife anymore. What would that mean? Why would he say it there? Why would he say it then? And why did Meghan react like she heard exactly what she feared? Because if that line is true, then everything changes. The marriage narrative changes. The power dynamic changes. The jealousy changes. The rivalry changes. The public interpretation changes. And Harry's identity changes most of all. But before you jump to conclusions, there's another layer. A witness says the phrase had a second part. A part that was even more shocking. A part that hasn't been made public. A part that reframes the entire event. But before we get to that, before we examine the footage, before we analyze the whispers, the rivalry, the jealousy, and the reaction that exposed the truth, there's something the audience needs to understand. Harry didn't always react this way. There was a time when he defended Meghan instantly. There was a time when he shielded her. There was a time when he stood between her and Kate like a barrier. So what changed? When did it change? And why did it change here, at this moment, in front of cameras, in front of Kate, and in front of a world that has been waiting for cracks to show? Because cracks don't appear suddenly. They form slowly, silently. Then one day, something small makes them visible, and everyone pretends they appeared overnight. This wasn't about one jealous move. This was about years of tension finally becoming impossible to hide. So now the question becomes unavoidable. Was Meghan jealous of Kate? Or was Meghan jealous of the version of Harry that only Kate brings out? And even deeper than that, was Harry reacting to Meghan? Or was Harry reacting to the man he used to be before her? Because here is the truth audiences feel but cannot articulate. Kate represents Harry's past. Meghan represents Harry's rebellion. What happens when rebellion becomes regret? What happens when the past looks calmer than the present? What happens when the person you chose reveals the cost you didn't calculate? That is the heartbeat of this story, and the world sensed it in that moment. A rivalry exposed, an insecurity triggered, a marriage questioned, a prince caught in the middle of who he was and who he became. So here we stand, with one final question before the story unfolds. Was this the moment Harry realized something he can no longer unrealize? It happened in a split second. The kind of moment most people would miss unless they were watching closely, waiting, searching for a sign. But millions were watching, and millions were waiting. Because whenever Meghan Markle and Kate Middleton appear in the same space, the world holds its breath. And in that single instant, before anyone spoke, before a camera flash even registered, Meghan's expression changed. It was tiny. It was sharp. It was instinctive. And it was enough to ignite speculation like gasoline to a match. Did you see it? Did you feel it? Did something inside you say, there it is? Because countless viewers did. They paused. They rewound. They zoomed. They replayed the footage like detectives analyzing evidence in a crime scene. They compared screenshots. They posted side-by-side stills. They slowed the frame rate. Why? Because something about that moment felt real. Unfiltered. Uncontrolled. And nothing in the world of royal optics is more valuable than an unscripted reaction. But what exactly happened? What was the trigger? Kate Middleton walked into the room. That's it. Nothing dramatic. Nothing confrontational. No words exchanged. No gestures made. Just Kate entering, smiling politely, carrying herself with the calm elegance she has mastered over years of public scrutiny. And yet Meghan reacted as though something territorial had been challenged. Her posture shifted. Her shoulders tightened. Her eyes narrowed for a fraction of a second before she forced a smile that didn't match the tension in her jaw. Why would that happen? Why would Kate's simple presence alter Meghan's entire energy? Some say it's history. Some say it's personality. Some say it's the unavoidable reality that Kate embodies everything Meghan expected to receive when she married Harry: admiration, acceptance, adoration, and a role that would place her at the center of royal life. But that never happened. Meghan did not become the beloved princess figure. She became something else, something louder, something controversial, something dividing. And Kate? She remained adored. That contrast alone could make anyone uneasy. But in that moment, the uneasiness wasn't subtle. It was visible. It was emotional. It was raw enough to ripple through the room like a silent vibration. Harry felt it too. His eyes flicked toward Meghan, then toward Kate, then downward as though bracing for something. His expression tightened, not in anger, but in anticipation, as if he already knew what was coming, as if he had been through this before, as if this was no longer surprising. Which raises the question, has Meghan reacted this way every time Kate appears? Or was this time different? Let's go deeper. Look at the way Meghan's hand moved. A small adjustment, a repositioning, almost like she needed to reassert presence. Then came the half-step forward, subtle enough to pass as coincidence, intentional enough to read like competition. The timing was too perfect to ignore. Kate hadn't even spoken yet. Her mere arrival was enough. What does that tell you? Was Meghan trying to block Kate from attention? Was she trying to appear closer to Harry? Was she trying to change where the cameras pointed? Or was she reacting to something internal, something insecure, unresolved, or fueled by years of comparison? And here's where the story sharpens. Because the people who defend Meghan insist that it was harmless, that Meghan was simply adjusting her position, that the moment was perfectly normal. But if it were normal, why did so many feel tension instantly? Why did body language experts, commentators, and casual viewers all say the same thing without talking to each other? They felt jealousy, not imagined, not invented, felt. Emotion leaves fingerprints, even when disguised. And Meghan's fingerprints were all over that moment. But it wasn't only her. Because just as Meghan reacted, Kate did something unexpected. She smiled warmly, but with a softness that did not acknowledge Meghan at all. It wasn't rude. It wasn't dismissive. It was simply independent of Meghan's presence. As if Kate existed in a completely different emotional atmosphere. As if Meghan's energy could not touch her. That made it worse. Because nothing irritates insecurity more than someone who is unaffected by it. Kate didn't compete. Kate didn't signal tension. Kate didn't alter her posture. Kate didn't force a smile. Kate didn't even look uneasy. She was serene. And serenity can feel like dominance when someone else is on edge. So the audience saw it, the imbalance. Meghan projecting pressure. Kate refusing to absorb it. The contrast was powerful. One appeared strained. The other appeared effortless. One appeared reactive. The other appeared centered. One appeared threatened. The other appeared unbothered. And Harry? His reaction sealed the moment. He didn't gravitate toward Meghan to soothe her. He didn't place a reassuring hand on her back. He didn't lean toward her in solidarity. He slightly pulled away. Why would a husband do that in a moment of visible tension? Why put distance where support should be? Was he embarrassed? Was he tired? Was he frustrated? Or did he simply not want to be associated with her reaction? This is where the first emotional spike hits, because audiences weren't just watching Meghan and Kate. They were watching Harry, and Harry told a story without saying a word. His eyes avoided Meghan's. His jaw clenched. His posture stiffened. His hands shifted in that subtle way people adjust when they wish they could disappear from a moment. People noticed. They commented. They screen captured. Some even said Harry looked like a man standing beside someone he didn't want to be connected to. Was that an exaggeration? Maybe. But perception spreads faster than facts. And perception now had momentum. That's when the humor kicked in online. Comparisons. Memes. Captions. Sarcasm that bites because it feels true. People joked. Looks like Harry wants to switch seats. Harry's spirit just left his body. Blink twice if you need help. Humor is often the language of discomfort. And the world was laughing because the moment felt too awkward to absorb without it. But beneath the laughter was something serious. People weren't mocking Meghan alone. They were highlighting the growing gap between her and Harry. And that gap became visible because of Kate. Which leads to the real twist, the one that made commentators lean in. Someone else saw the expression change. Someone who was not supposed to. An aide. A staff member. Someone close enough to observe without being observed. Someone trained to notice subtle shifts in atmosphere for security reasons. Their eyes widened. Their breathing paused. They looked at Harry, then Meghan, then Kate. Why? What did they sense? What did they know from experience? Because staff members have seen more than cameras ever will. They have witnessed the private tension, the whispered arguments, the strained silences. They know when a couple is united. And when they are pretending. So why did this staff member react at that exact moment? What did Meghan's expression reveal that the world isn't supposed to recognize yet? Here is where the audience begins asking the deeper questions. The questions that pull them into the story like gravity. Was this jealousy new? Or was this jealousy familiar? Has Meghan always felt threatened by Kate? Or has something recently intensified it? And most importantly, why now? Why at this event? Why in front of cameras? Why when the world was already watching for signs of strain? Because timing is never accidental in royal dynamics. There is always context, history, pressure, or a private incident that spills over into public view. So what happened before this moment? Did Meghan feel overshadowed again? Did Harry say something earlier that unsettled her? Did Kate receive attention Meghan expected? Did the seating arrangement trigger something? Or did Meghan simply feel the presence of someone she cannot outshine? That is the emotional center of this chapter. The realization that jealousy isn't about the other woman. It's about the fear of losing influence. And when influence slips, reactions sharpen. But the real cliffhanger develops here, because someone else noticed the moment. Someone who should not have been close enough to observe it. Someone whose reaction suggests there was more happening beneath the surface. Someone who will become important later in the story. Because they weren't simply observing Meghan. They were observing Harry. And what they saw in his eyes. The moment Kate Middleton responded, the entire tone of the room shifted. Not because she said anything. Not because she gestured dramatically. Not because she asserted herself. But because she did the opposite. She remained calm. Effortlessly calm. Gracefully calm. Naturally calm in a way that didn't look practiced or staged, but rooted in something deeper, confidence. And nothing intensifies another person's insecurity quite like genuine confidence. Kate didn't lock eyes with Meghan, didn't flash a competitive grin, didn't stiffen or retreat. Instead, she offered a soft, composed smile to the room at large, greeting others, acknowledging faces, radiating the kind of ease that cannot be faked and cannot be forced. It was the kind of presence that doesn't try to dominate, yet somehow dominates anyway. And that made everything worse for Meghan. Did you see the shift? Did you notice how Meghan's smile strained just a little more? How her eyes darted, searching for validation. How her body angled slightly, as though positioning mattered more than comfort. Because it did. To her, it mattered greatly. Kate's calm exposed Meghan's tension. That's the secret dynamic the audience felt, but could not fully name. Calm can be threatening when standing beside someone who is desperate to be seen. But why was Kate calm? Why was Meghan tense? Why was Harry watching as though he already knew how the scene would unfold? Let's break it down the way analysts did online. Kate has been in the royal spotlight for over a decade. She has weathered scrutiny, comparison, expectations, criticism, and pressure with consistency. She has been called perfect, boring, elegant, robotic, poised, bland, regal, silent, radiant, and controlled. But through all of it, her demeanor never wavered. That stability created an image the public trusts. People know what to expect from her. Meghan, on the other hand, has lived in volatility, headlines, controversies, interviews, accusations, counter-accusations, shifting narratives, dramatic swings between admiration and backlash. She has been called brave, manipulative, misunderstood, ambitious, outspoken, entitled, inspiring, calculating, victimized, empowered, and always polarizing. Nothing about her public presence has been stable. Calm versus volatility. That dynamic alone sets the stage before anyone speaks. So when Kate responded to Meghan's subtle territorial move with grace instead of tension, it did something far more damaging than confrontation. it highlighted the contrast. It made Meghan's insecurity visible simply by refusing to mirror it. Think about that. The most powerful reaction is the one that doesn't react. And Harry? He saw it. His eyes flickered again, but this time the flicker carried something heavier, familiarity. As if he had watched this exact dynamic play out before. As if he knew that Meghan's internal temperature would rise the calmer Kate became. As if he understood that the more serene Kate appeared, the more Meghan would feel overshadowed. Was this the first time? Not likely. Was it the strongest time? Possibly. Was it the most public time? Absolutely. Now here's where the emotional spike sharpens. Kate's calm wasn't accidental. It was inherited from the very institution Meghan never mastered. Royal behavior is a performance, but a subtle one. It requires stillness, not spectacle. Meghan entered the royal world with Hollywood instincts, expression, projection, presence, charisma, spotlight. Kate mastered monarchy instincts, reserve, composure, timing, diplomacy. The two styles were never going to blend. But the real twist is this. Kate didn't need to outperform Meghan. Meghan needed to outperform Kate. And needing something makes a person vulnerable. So the audience watched as Meghan tried to reassert presence, while Kate remained untouched by the need to prove anything. People felt that imbalance. People reacted to it. People interpreted it, even if they couldn't articulate why. But here's where the story deepens. Kate wasn't just calm, she was gracious. She greeted others softly, smiled genuinely, and focused outward rather than inward. She wasn't trying to win. She wasn't trying to shine. She wasn't trying to dominate the space. She simply existed in it naturally. Yet that naturalness became a form of dominance. Because when one woman is trying and the other woman doesn't need to, the audience knows instantly who holds the real power. And Meghan felt that. You could see it in the way her posture straightened just a little too much. In the way her laugh came a half-second late. In the way she gestured a bit more than necessary. In the way her eyes checked Harry, then Kate, then the cameras. She was adjusting, calculating, performing. Kate was simply being. And performance always cracks beside authenticity. Here's where humor crept into the public commentary. People wrote, Kate showed up with silence and still won. Meghan is playing checkers while Kate is playing chess. Kate is calm because she already has the job Meghan wanted. But beneath the humor was an uncomfortable truth. People weren't rooting for Meghan in that moment. They were observing her, studying her. Watching her lose ground, she didn't want anyone to see slipping. And Harry noticed that too. That's when the moment intensified, because Harry's discomfort became impossible to ignore. He shifted, not dramatically, but noticeably enough that anyone paying attention could feel the emotional distance. It wasn't a protective stance. It wasn't a united front. It was the posture of someone anticipating fallout. Why would Harry anticipate fallout? Because he has lived it. Behind closed doors. After events. After comparisons. After headlines. After looks like this one. So when Kate remained calm, Harry didn't relax. He braced. And Meghan? She reacted again, but more subtly this time. A raised chin, a tightened smile, a quick inhale. The kind of reaction someone has when they feel outperformed without effort. This is where audience questions grew sharper. Why does Meghan always seem unsettled around Kate? Why does Kate become more powerful by doing nothing? Why does Harry look like he'd rather vanish? Why does tension follow these three like a shadow? And the biggest one, what happened before this moment that made this reaction so intense? Because reactions come from triggers, and this wasn't a new rivalry, but the latest chapter in a long, quiet one. A rivalry Meghan has denied. A rivalry Kate has never acknowledged. A rivalry Harry has been trapped between. But the real escalation came when Kate turned slightly toward the crowd, engaging others, and Meghan realized she wasn't included. Not intentionally excluded, simply not centered. And to someone who built identity around being at the center, that exclusion felt like erasure. That's when the emotional tone changed again, because Meghan stepped forward once more, attempting to insert herself into the circle. But the gesture didn't land. It wasn't fluid. It wasn't seamless. It was noticeable. And being noticeable isn't always a win. Kate continued speaking softly to those around her, and Meghan was left momentarily suspended between relevance and redundancy. The cameras caught it. Viewers felt it. Commentators described it as the moment Meghan realized she could not visually override Kate. And Harry? His expression turned heavier. Not shocked, not angry, just resigned, as if this scene had played out too many times, as if he already knew where it was headed, as if this wasn't about Kate at all, but about the way Meghan reacts to Kate. And here comes the turning point of the chapter, the one that made analysts stop and look again. Kate didn't ignore Meghan. She acknowledged her, but gently, briefly, politely, in a way that communicated exactly one message. You do not unsettle me. That was the worst outcome possible for Meghan. Because if Kate had appeared threatened, Meghan would have felt powerful. If Kate had appeared intimidated, Meghan would have felt victorious. If Kate had appeared uncomfortable, Meghan would have felt superior. But Kate appeared untouched, and that made Meghan feel exposed. The more Kate stayed calm, the more Meghan appeared reactive. The more Kate remained composed, the more Meghan appeared unsettled. The more Kate seemed natural, the more Meghan seemed performative. And Harry? He was watching both women, but for two different reasons. He watched Kate because she reminded him of familiarity. He watched Meghan because she reminded him of responsibility. And responsibility is heavier than familiarity. Now comes the cliffhanger seed, because Meghan wasn't the only one who noticed Kate's calm. Someone else did. Someone whose reaction mattered. Someone who would later become the key to interpreting what happened next. Someone standing close enough to watch Harry's expression change. Because Kate's calm didn't just intensify Meghan's insecurity. It triggered Harry's response. A response that would lead to the alleged statement. A response that witnesses would whisper about. A response that would explode online. A response that would redefine the moment entirely. Because Kate's calm didn't end the tension. It lit the fuse. It happened so quickly that most people missed it the first time. But once someone pointed it out, no one could unsee it. Because while Meghan's expression shifted and Kate remained calm, Prince Harry did something that changed the entire meaning of the moment. Something subtle, something revealing, something that told a story all by itself. And the more people replayed it, the clearer it became. Harry didn't lean toward Meghan. He leaned away. Why would a husband do that? Why would a man who once appeared glued to his wife's side suddenly create space between them? Why would the prince who once held Meghan's hand like a lifeline now adjust his stance, as if trying to detach from the tension around him? That was the first sign. But it wasn't the most shocking part. The most shocking part was the look in his eyes. Not anger, not fear, not annoyance, but recognition. As if he had seen this pattern before. As if he already knew how Meghan would react to Kate's calmness. As if he anticipated jealousy before it even appeared. And that expression told a truth that words didn't need to speak. This wasn't new. This wasn't surprising. This wasn't a one-time reaction. This was a cycle. But how long had this cycle been happening? How long had Harry been navigating the emotional terrain between Meghan and Kate? How long had he been the silent buffer between rivalry and insecurity? Because at that moment, his face said more than any tabloid headline ever had. He looked tired. Not tired like someone lacking sleep. Tired like someone lacking peace. And audiences felt it. They didn't need subtitles. They didn't need voiceovers. They didn't need experts to decode anything for them. They simply watched the way Harry's expression dimmed the second Meghan reacted and understood the emotional weight behind it. Have you ever watched someone realize they are trapped in a dynamic they can't escape? That was the look. But here's where it gets even more interesting. A whisper entered the scene. A small, barely visible moment when Harry leaned slightly towards someone standing near him. Not Meghan, not Kate, but a staff member. His lips moved. His throat tightened. His jaw shifted with the kind of tension a person feels when they are trying to keep something inside. What did he say? Was it frustration? A warning? A plea? Or was it something more shocking? Something that would later become the viral claim? Some lip-reading enthusiasts swear that Harry muttered a short phrase, and they believe it was the beginning of the now infamous line. Others insist it was merely a sigh, a release of pressure, nothing more. But the speculation exploded because of what happened immediately afterward. Meghan touched Harry's arm. It wasn't affectionate. It wasn't tender. It wasn't supportive. It was corrective, the kind of touch someone uses to claim possession, to redirect attention, to signal control. And Harry reacted, not by softening, not by smiling, not by leaning toward her, but by stiffening. That was the moment people began to ask the question that changed the tone of the story. Was Harry embarrassed? Because that's what his posture suggested. Not anger, not fear. Embarrassment. Embarrassment at Meghan's visible reaction. Embarrassment at the tension it created. Embarrassment that Kate was handling the moment with effortless composure. And embarrassment, when witnessed publicly, always leads to speculation. But then came the part that sent a ripple through the room, the whisper. Someone nearby, someone close enough to hear, widened their eyes and turned their head just slightly. Not dramatically, not theatrically, just enough for anyone watching closely to notice that they heard something unexpected. What did they hear? Why did they react? Why did they look at Meghan, then at Harry, then quickly look away? That is when the rumor took shape, not online, not in tabloids, but in the room itself. Because reactions spread faster than words. And this reaction traveled. Observers shifted. Energy changed. Kate's eyes flicked sideways for the briefest moment. Not long enough to be rude, just long enough to convey awareness. And in that tiny glance was the unspoken acknowledgement. She felt the shift too, and that is when the world began to wonder. If Kate sensed something, if staff sensed something, if Harry reacted visibly, then what really happened in that whisper? Was it a sigh? Was it a complaint? Was it a muttered line? Or was it the phrase that would soon become the center of speculation? She is not my wife. But before jumping forward, we must sit in the moment as it unfolded, because storytelling is not just about what happened, but how it felt. And that moment felt tense, fragile, and strangely revealing. Harry swallowed hard. His eyes didn't meet Meghan's. His shoulders lifted slightly, the way a person braces for impact. And Meghan smiled, not at Harry, not at Kate, but at the cameras. It was the smile of someone trying to reset the narrative in real time. A smile that said everything is fine even when everything is cracking. A smile that carried just enough strain to betray the truth beneath it. And audiences asked themselves, why does Meghan always perform when Kate is present? Why does Harry always withdraw when Meghan performs? Why does Kate always remain calm when tension rises? These three reactions formed a triangle, and triangles tell stories. But the moment sharpened even further when someone approached Kate and spoke softly to her. Kate responded with warmth, attentiveness, and a relaxed expression that made the contrast even sharper. She appeared grounded. Meghan appeared reactive, and Harry appeared stuck in the middle. Yet here is the twist most people missed on the first viewing. Harry didn't look at Kate with resentment. He looked at her with familiarity. That familiarity startled the audience because it reminded them of something they forgot. Harry and Kate once shared an ease, a sibling-like camaraderie, a natural comfort that came long before Meghan entered the picture. And seeing that familiarity return, even for a split second, made Meghan's reaction feel even more intense. Was she reacting to Kate? Or was she reacting to Harry's reaction to Kate? Because jealousy isn't always about the rival. Sometimes it's about the person who might drift toward them. And that is when the emotional undertone of the moment shifted from irritation to insecurity. Harry's unexpected reaction wasn't just physical distance. It was emotional distance. And emotional distance is louder than words. But here's where the story deepens further. Because at that exact moment, Meghan leaned closer to Harry again, trying to reclaim proximity. But Harry didn't lean back. He remained still. His stillness spoke volumes. Stillness can be rejection. Stillness can be avoidance. Stillness can be resignation. And the audience felt it like a cold draft in a warm room. Why wasn't Harry responding to Meghan's cues? Was he angry? Was he embarrassed? Was he overwhelmed? Or was he simply done performing unity for the cameras? Then came the moment that ignited everything. Harry whispered something again, this time with a tighter jaw and a quicker glance toward Meghan. And that second whisper became the spark that fueled every theory that followed. Because this time, Meghan reacted. Her eyes widened, just for a fraction of a second, before she reset her expression. She inhaled sharply. She blinked twice. She straightened her spine. She tried to recover. What did she hear? And why did it hit her that way? Some say Harry told her to stop. Some say Harry told her to relax. Some say Harry told her not now. But the boldest claim, the one that electrified social media, was that Harry said the second half of the alleged phrase. Not my wife. Those words, if true, would not simply be a slip, they would be a fracture. A fracture between appearance and reality, between performance and truth, between union and separation. But before the audience could form a conclusion, before the room could process the tension, before Meghan could fully recalibrate, something else happened. Kate turned, not dramatically, not slowly, but with perfect timing, and made eye contact with someone behind Harry. Her expression was calm, composed, and unreadable, but the timing made it feel like she sensed everything happening without acknowledging any of it. And that's when viewers began asking themselves, was Kate aware? Was she deliberately staying above the tension? Or was she simply unaffected? Because indifference can be more powerful than confrontation. Harry saw Kate turn, and for a brief moment, something flashed across his expression, not longing, not regret, but recognition. Recognition of familiarity. Recognition of a version of himself that existed before everything became complicated. That was the moment when people began to speculate that Harry's reaction wasn't just about Meghan's jealousy. It was about his own internal conflict. A conflict between past and present, between comfort and chaos, between peace and pressure. The whisper became symbolic, whether real or misheard. It became the verbal embodiment of something audiences had sensed for years, that Harry sometimes looked like a man living someone else's story. But here is the final twist of this chapter, the part that sets up everything that follows. Someone else heard the whisper, not a bystander, not a lip reader, not a commentator watching footage later. A person standing close enough to hear it directly. A person whose expression changed when the words were spoken. A person who would later become the source of the claim that the phrase was real, but incomplete. Because according to them, Harry didn't just say one line. He said two. And the second part, she is not my wife. The words echoed in whispers before they ever reached the cameras. At first, most people didn't catch them. But once those who were present began repeating the phrase, the ripple spread like wildfire. A single sentence, allegedly uttered by Prince Harry, now had the power to shift public perception, ignite controversy, and, for some, rewrite the narrative of a marriage that the world thought it understood. Did he really say it? That was the question on everyone's lips. The cameras didn't capture sound in a way that confirmed it, yet witnesses swore they heard it. Staffers close enough to the moment claimed they did. The phrase spread from murmured gossip to whispered rumors, and by the time it hit social media, the speculation had become explosive. But context matters. What exactly did Harry mean? Was it meant as a rebuke? A clarification? A joke? Or a frustrated declaration of a truth he could no longer ignore? The answer remained elusive, and that ambiguity only intensified the drama. Let's rewind to the moment itself. The room was a mixture of elegance and tension. Cameras clicked relentlessly. Royals smiled for the lenses, but the undercurrents were invisible to most viewers. For those paying attention, however, the subtleties were undeniable. Meghan had shifted her posture, a half-step toward Harry, as if reclaiming his attention. Kate, serene and unshaken, remained composed. And Harry? He leaned subtly away, his expression a mixture of fatigue, recognition, and unease. Then the words were supposedly uttered, quiet enough to escape the cameras, but loud enough for those nearby to catch them. She is not my wife. Imagine hearing that from someone you thought would be your unwavering partner, your defender, the person who once spoke about loyalty and love on global stages. Imagine the shock of realizing that the words may have been meant not to confront Kate, not to assert dominance, but to signal something unspoken, a private truth revealed in the open. Observers scrambled to interpret the phrase. One theory, Harry was emphasizing that Meghan was not, in this moment, acting as his partner, that she had overstepped and he needed to regain balance. Another theory, he was acknowledging the tension between Meghan and Kate, subtly differentiating roles without addressing it openly. A third, more sensational theory, he was questioning his own connection to Meghan in a way that foreshadowed future fractures. And the ambiguity fueled fascination. Social media lit up with debates. Every body language analyst offered an opinion. Every lip-reading enthusiast dissected every micro-expression. Every tabloid and commentator speculated endlessly. Some claimed the words were misheard, others insisted on their authenticity. The truth was unclear, yet the impact was immediate. But let's not ignore the emotional element. Meghan's reaction, though brief, betrayed recognition. Her eyes widened slightly, a micro-expression of surprise and concern. She blinked rapidly, straightened her posture, and attempted to reset her demeanor for the cameras. That split-second acknowledgement suggested she understood the gravity of the statement, whether intended as critique, reflection, or something else entirely. And Harry's own expression revealed layers. It wasn't anger or even frustration. It was a mixture of recognition and calculation. Recognition that Meghan's jealousy had surfaced again, and calculation about how to navigate the optics of the room. The prince had always been aware of public perception, of course, but this moment carried the added weight of personal tension spilling into the public sphere. The surrounding staff and observers noticed immediately. There were subtle shifts in posture, in glances exchanged, in facial expressions. Everyone became hyper-aware of the delicate balance in the room. This was no longer a casual social encounter. It had become a stage for private dynamics to play out in front of a global audience. What makes this moment even more compelling is the conflicting narratives. Meghan supporters claim Harry was reacting to Kate's presence, attempting to maintain peace while subtly asserting boundaries. Kate's supporters argue that Harry's words reflected frustration with Meghan's behavior and her attempt to insert herself into situations where composure was already maintained. And those watching from the outside, millions online, were left interpreting, assuming, and speculating based on subtle cues and partial information. One element that has intrigued insiders is the timing of the alleged statement. Some claim Harry spoke the phrase immediately after Meghan's subtle advance toward Kate. Others say it occurred moments later, after a whispered exchange with a nearby staff member. The distinction matters because timing informs intent. Was it reactive, preemptive, a defense mechanism, or a calculated remark aimed at drawing lines publicly and privately? And then there's the second layer, whispers that Harry did not end with "she is not my wife." Observers claim a second half was spoken, inaudible to most but crucial to understanding the sentiment. Allegedly, the full statement could have been, "She is not my wife in the way you think she is," or even, "She is not my wife to compare with Kate." The variations completely shift meaning, from critique to clarification to veiled tension. Imagine the audience's perspective. They see Meghan's posture, Kate's calm, and Harry's subtle shifts. They don't hear the second half, but they sense that something was said. They speculate endlessly, filling in the blanks with interpretation, gossip, or personal bias. And that speculation amplifies tension, keeping the story alive long after the event concluded. Let's pause to consider the human element. What must it feel like to be Meghan in this moment? Surrounded by scrutiny, aware that your every movement is analyzed, seeing the calm of Kate juxtaposed against your own tension, and hearing, or thinking you hear, your husband make a statement that seems to diminish your role? The psychological pressure is immense. And that's exactly why this moment captivates the public. It combines visibility, emotion, and ambiguity in a potent mix. Similarly, Harry's perspective is critical. For him, this is not a simple social misstep. It is the intersection of marital tension, rivalry, public scrutiny, and personal identity. In a split second, he must navigate the optics of two women, maintain dignity, and protect the narrative of his own choices. It's a high-stakes negotiation of emotion and image, a performance invisible to some, yet impossible to miss for others. The ripple effect of those words, real or perceived, was immediate. Online communities exploded. Fans, critics, and casual observers alike debated the meaning, dissected body language, and speculated on implications. Media outlets published frame-by-frame analyses, each interpretation more dramatic than the last. And for those in the room, the tension lingered long after the moment passed, as the energy of the interaction reverberated silently, shaping subsequent interactions in subtle but meaningful ways. Finally, the most compelling aspect, the phrase, "she is not my wife," carries multiple layers. On the surface, it's simple, but in context, it becomes explosive. It suggests distance, differentiation, and perhaps even a re-evaluation of dynamics that everyone assumed were stable. Whether Harry intended it as commentary, defense, or subtle rebuke, the perception alone ensured that the moment would become a defining element of public discussion about the couple. And now comes the cliffhanger that sets up the next chapter. Witnesses claimed that a second phrase followed the first, one that was even more revealing, one that could redefine the meaning of the event entirely. And this second phrase, whispered, subtle, yet charged, would soon dominate conversations, leaks, and speculation. The cameras had stopped clicking. The flashes had faded. The public-facing smiles and poised gestures were gone. And yet the tension in the air didn't vanish. It followed Meghan and Harry behind the closed doors where no one could watch, where no one could analyze the expressions or replay the gestures, where words could finally be spoken aloud, freely, without performance, without optics, without a carefully curated narrative. This was the moment the cameras never capture, the moment most audiences can only speculate about, the moment insiders, aides, and staff dread because it's raw, unpredictable, and personal. It began as a conversation. Initially calm, even measured, but within seconds, it escalated. Meghan's voice, soft yet firm, carried hints of frustration and underlying anger. Harry's voice, low and steady, betrayed tension that no one watching the public event could have anticipated. And in the middle of that room, the emotional undercurrents became impossible to hide. "Do you not understand how that looked?" Meghan reportedly said, her words measured but sharp, her frustration barely contained. She gestured subtly toward where Kate had been moments before, the graceful smile, the serene composure, the calm presence that had unintentionally highlighted every insecurity Meghan had been carrying. Harry, for his part, didn't react immediately. He paced, quietly, a subtle tension in his shoulders and jaw. His hand rubbed the back of his neck, a gesture indicating both stress and contemplation. He had been through this before. He had navigated similar conflicts countless times in public. But private conflicts? Ones where no one can see you, judge you, or intervene. Those are far more dangerous, because they hit at the core, at trust, loyalty, and the fragile fabric of a relationship. "You don't get it," Harry finally said, voice firm but low. "This isn't about Kate. It's about how you're reacting." Again, Meghan paused, blinking, processing the remark. Her expression shifted, first surprise, then indignation, then a brief flash of hurt. She crossed her arms, leaning slightly forward, as if reclaiming her emotional ground. And that is when the real escalation began. Again, Meghan repeated, a subtle hiss in her voice. "Do you even hear yourself? I am trying to be present. I am trying to connect. And somehow it's always a problem." The words weren't loud, but in the quiet room, every syllable reverberated like a drumbeat of tension. Harry inhaled slowly, grounding himself. His voice, when he spoke next, was calm, deliberate. But underneath, it carried the weight of a man who had been pushed into frustration after years of managing conflicting emotions. "It's not about connection," he said. "It's about control. You're reacting to everything and everyone. You're trying to compete. And this isn't a contest." The phrase hit like a lightning bolt, because it was true, even if no one wanted to admit it. Meghan had always been acutely aware of optics, presence, and influence. A skill honed over years in Hollywood and amplified by the global gaze of the royal spotlight. And while competition in social environments can be subtle, private moments amplify the intensity. Here, no one could perform. Here, no one could hide. Meghan's lips pressed together tightly. Her jaw shifted subtly. Her eyes, which moments ago had been expressive and searching, now hardened. And Harry noticed. He had been expecting it. He had experienced it before. But every time, it carried the same sting, the mix of hurt, indignation, and defensive pride. "Do you even hear yourself?" Meghan's voice rose slightly, controlled yet emotionally charged. "You're telling me I'm overreacting when all I did was respond to what I saw. You saw it. Everyone saw it. And now you act like it's my fault." It was the classic escalation pattern. One person perceives critique, reacts defensively, and the other responds with a statement meant to clarify or redirect. In this case, the dynamic was intensified by history, by rivalry, by expectation, by the pressure of living life under the relentless scrutiny of millions of people worldwide. Harry's next words reportedly carried the weight of years compressed into a few sentences. "You always position yourself against her," he said, the words deliberate, cutting through the air like a scalpel. "It's not about her. It's never been about her. It's about how you choose to react. Every time. And it's exhausting. Meghan's reaction was instantaneous. Eyes widened slightly, a sharp inhale, a subtle exhale. Her hands unconsciously moved, first crossing, then gesturing, then settling again. Body language analysts watching later would describe it as defensive, protective, and reactive. It was the body speaking when the mind could not, revealing the internal struggle, the discomfort, the awareness of being called out. Exhausting, she repeated, her voice tense. Do you know how exhausting it is for me too? To constantly navigate you, your family, the media, the cameras, the expectations? Do you think this is easy? And Harry paused, not out of hesitation, but reflection. His eyes softened, though the tension in his jaw remained. He was navigating a minefield of emotional truths. Here, in private, the walls that had protected them publicly no longer applied. And what emerged was raw, unscripted, and revealing. You're right, he said quietly, almost under his breath. It's not easy, but it's not about competition. It's about partnership. And sometimes, I feel like we're not partners in moments like this. I feel like you're fighting a battle I didn't sign up for. A battle I never agreed to enter. The room went silent for a heartbeat. And in that pause, Meghan's reaction was subtle but telling. Her lips pressed together, her eyes glancing away for a second, a fraction of a blink that signaled recognition, awareness, and the dawning understanding that Harry was speaking not just about the public event, but about a deeper pattern. The conversation then turned sharper, but quieter, the kind of heated exchange that doesn't need volume to land impact. Words were deliberate. Pauses were calculated. The underlying emotional stakes, trust, loyalty, insecurity, and frustration, became the unspoken language. Every gesture, every blink, every subtle movement communicated more than the words themselves. You don't think I notice? Meghan said, her voice measured, almost cutting through the tension like a fine blade. You don't think I see it? Every subtle glance, every interaction, every comparison? You think I don't feel it? Harry leaned back slightly, exhaling slowly. I see it, he said. I just wish you'd see what it does to us, to me, when you let it take over. It's tearing us apart before anyone else even notices. The intensity of the private exchange was unlike anything experienced in public. Cameras capture the surface, insiders capture the depths, and those who were present later described the room as vibrating with unspoken tension. The kind of tension that leaves an imprint long after the voices have quieted. And then, reportedly, Harry said it, or began to say it. The phrase that would dominate headlines, rumors, and public fascination. She is not my wife. It was not shouted. It was not dramatic. It was deliberate. It was whispered, quiet enough that it barely carried beyond the walls, yet loud enough for Meghan to hear. And in that moment, the private argument became iconic. Because the words, real, partial, or misinterpreted, carried a weight that would reverberate through the media, through public speculation, and through the narrative of their relationship. Some say it was a statement of frustration. Others claim it was an acknowledgement of distance. A few insist it was a warning. Regardless of interpretation, the alleged phrase revealed something undeniable, a fracture between performance and reality, expectation and behavior, public image and private emotion. And that is where this chapter leaves us, with tension simmering, emotions raw, and an audience craving the next revelation. What exactly followed the whisper, what Meghan did in response, and how Harry's words would come to define the unfolding drama. The tension that unfolded in that private room didn't happen in isolation. To truly understand the emotional undertone, the subtle glances, and the whispered exchanges, one must trace it back years. Long before Meghan married Harry, long before headlines swarmed with speculation, and long before Kate had become the embodiment of calm, collected composure in the public eye. Meghan and Kate's rivalry didn't start with an event, a gesture, or a momentary clash. It began with perception. A perception shaped by comparison, by expectation, and by the subtle but unrelenting scrutiny of the media and the public. From the very beginning, Meghan was conscious of Kate's legacy. The poised elegance, the effortless composure, the immediate admiration she inspired, all of it presented a standard that Meghan felt she needed to meet, exceed, or, at the very least, challenge. And this perception created an invisible battlefield. It wasn't always visible to outsiders. Most people only saw smiles, shared appearances, and carefully curated interactions. But anyone paying close attention could notice patterns. Subtle shifts in posture, eye contact that lingered too long, gestures that implied subtle claims to attention or prominence. It was a dynamic built over years, quietly intensifying, unseen but always present. Think about it. Meghan entered the royal family with Hollywood instincts, trained to be charismatic, assertive, and visible. Kate, by contrast, had spent years mastering monarchy instincts, which meant restraint, patience, and subtle influence. One approach thrived on expression, the other on perception. And while both are effective in their respective arenas, they clash when proximity and circumstance demand negotiation of shared space. This invisible tension became tangible in shared events. Photographs, video footage, and even casual commentary reveal micro-expressions that suggest Meghan is often subtly reacting to Kate's presence rather than independently projecting confidence. A tilt of the head, a measured smile, a glance toward Harry that is immediately recalibrated. These seemingly minor details hint at an ongoing internal calculus, a constant evaluation of dominance, presence, and influence. Kate, by contrast, rarely shows signs of reacting. Her body language, her facial expressions, her mannerisms, all suggest a remarkable ease. She does not need to perform dominance. She does not need to assert her presence because her composure naturally commands attention. And therein lies the emotional spike. When Meghan reacts to what Kate embodies effortlessly, the contrast is magnified. This long-running rivalry, however, is not just about presence. It is about history, perception, and media narrative. Early in Meghan's relationship with Harry, tabloids and commentators frequently drew comparisons, framing Meghan as ambitious and Kate as established. These repeated narratives shaped public perception and, consciously or unconsciously, influenced Meghan's behavior. The pressure of being constantly measured against someone who embodies calm and favor makes every interaction charged, even when it appears casual to the untrained eye. Now consider the public events that most people believe are neutral. Charity appearances, official visits, ceremonies, all moments of supposed collaboration, are in fact arenas for subtle power plays. Observers note that Meghan's posture often aligns with calculated positioning. Closer to Harry, angled toward cameras, subtly drawing attention. Meanwhile, Kate's positioning is almost always effortless, natural, and strategically balanced. It is this dynamic, visible to those who analyze body language, that forms the backbone of the perceived rivalry. And it isn't just posture. Speech patterns, inflection, timing, and attention all contribute. Meghan's interjections in conversation, her timing of laughter, and her gestures can appear slightly exaggerated, almost as if she is performing for validation. Kate's responses, however, are measured, restrained, and always consistent. This creates a subtle but persistent tension, where Meghan's energy contrasts sharply with Kate's calm, leaving Harry and the audience to navigate the difference. Add to this the layer of history. Observers and insiders often reference incidents dating back to early events when Meghan first appeared at royal engagements. Small disagreements, misaligned gestures, and perceived slights have compounded over time. Each incident, seemingly minor on its own, contributes to an emotional ledger, building an ongoing narrative of competition. Meghan is acutely aware of the history. Kate is largely unconcerned, focusing instead on maintaining composure and projecting steadiness. This long-term pattern explains why small events, such as the one described in the previous chapters, can ignite significant reactions. Meghan's minor gesture toward Kate, combined with Kate's serene composure, triggered not just immediate tension, but years of accumulated rivalry. And Harry, positioned between the two women, is caught in a balancing act he cannot escape. His reactions, subtle shifts in posture, whispered comments, quiet exhalations, reflect the strain of navigating this long-running emotional dynamic. Some experts argue that rivalries of this nature are inevitable when personalities, upbringing, and public expectations intersect. Meghan's assertiveness and heightened awareness of perception clash naturally with Kate's calm assurance and measured presence. Each interaction becomes a test of influence and control, amplified by media scrutiny. Over time, these repeated tensions create a cycle. Meghan reacts, Kate remains composed, Harry observes, and the audience speculates. Yet there's an emotional spike here that often goes unnoticed. It is not just Meghan competing with Kate. It is Meghan navigating her relationship with Harry in the